many of us are surviving off of caffeine and a prayer? Well, it turns out that your bedtime routine might not be that magical solution to your sleep problems. In today's episode, we are exploring why sleep is a puzzle that most experts can't seem to solve, and we certainly can't seem to solve it, many of us on our own. And I want to start by sharing some really interesting, sobering statistics with you because the current data on sleep deprivation is telling us that a huge portion of the population in the United States is not getting enough sleep. And that can have serious implications for health and productivity. And if you're one of those people, you're going to want to stick around because I'm going to give you some tips, some real tips that you could possibly use to help you out. And I'm going to tell you why this may be happening. But first, let's go back to those statistics because we've got about 35% in the United States of adults that are reporting that they're not getting the recommended amount of sleep per night. And of that 35%, 20% of those individuals are not even receiving 6 hours of sleep. So they're getting much less than that per night. The problem of not having enough sleep appears to be pretty widespread. And on top of that, there are various age groups that experience different levels of sleep deprivation. And guess what? We have a winner. A winner of the age group that gets the less sleep overall. If you are of an adult between ages 45 and 54, congratulations, because you win that prize. And 39% of those adults falling into that category just fall into the way don't get enough sleep. Something else contributing to this is sleep disorders. They are a major concern. They do affect about 50 to 70 million American adults. Insomnia is the most common sleep disorder, probably the one you've most heard of, and it affects about 22% of US adults. A significant number of that 22% experience symptoms that are so severe that they actually meet the criteria for clinical insomnia. And interestingly, insomnia is more prevalent among women. Or is it interesting? Because I can tell you why that it's most prevalent among women, with nearly 1 in 4 affected if you compare that to men. But that is a whole nother episode. I want to talk about some of the economic impact of sleep deprivation. It is very substantial because you remember me telling you that it's impacting your productivity. Well, if you think about it, if you're not getting sleep, you're having a hard time showing up at work. And if you do show up at work, you're probably not at your best. So that's costing the US economy about 400 billion annually. And that's due to that loss of productivity, also increased workplace accidents. Now, this data is also linking insufficient sleep with higher risk of health problems. And I mentioned that earlier as well. Now, the data also links the fact that if you're not getting enough sleep, you're going to have a higher risk of developing certain diseases, specifically chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, obesity, to mention a few. And so you can see that it's really important to address sleep issues as part of preventative healthcare strategies. And if you're wondering why this puts you at a higher risk, well, I can tell you because your body when you're not getting the recommended amount of sleep, then your body is kind of staying in a heightened stress state. And we're going to get into that and explain how that has a direct impact on being more susceptible to these chronic diseases. Now, overall, these statistics underscore the need to have better public health strategies to promote adequate sleep because clearly people need sleep. We need to manage these sleep disorders and we need to do it effectively. We need to prioritize sleep hygiene. We need to manage stress. We need to limit the use of electronic devices before bedtime. That is the recommendations. Those are the strategies that you usually hear and some of you may be doing to improve your sleep quality and the amount of time that you're actually asleep. And this information about sleep hygiene is interesting. And also why I decided to do this video, because remember I told you that sleep is a puzzle that we can't seem to solve? Well, experts attempt to solve this puzzle by recommending a consistent bedtime routine. What I just mentioned, they refer to it as sleep hygiene. And they recommend all of the things I recommended. Don't use your device an hour before bedtime, manage your stress, keep your environment cool, etc. However, even the most detailed bedtime routine is in a lot of cases falling short. It's not delivering the much needed rest. And you may be relating to this right now in this moment. And here is why your bedtime routine, especially if you're following that, might not be that magical solution that you thought it was going to be. So there's this little thing called the stress paradox. So I want you to imagine this. I want to explain it in this way. So imagine this. It's in most of you probably don't have to imagine. It happens a lot. It's the night before something big. Maybe you have a final exam, you have a major event, maybe you have a job interview, but you're lying in bed. Your eyes are wide open and you can mentally hear a clock ticking in your room, right? And you're thinking to yourself, I need to be at sleep now. I need to go to sleep now so that I can be at my best tomorrow. And most likely, you pick up your phone or you look at whatever device, you look at the time, and you start counting how many hours of sleep you can get if you go to sleep right now. So, because you have started to count how many hours of sleep you will get if you go to sleep now, you close your eyes and you're basically trying to will yourself to sleep. And you're telling yourself, I need more sleep, go to sleep. And perhaps you start to drift off. And all of a sudden you jerk and you bolt awake. Maybe you heard something or think you heard something. You tell yourself. And so you tell yourself to stop it and go through that same pattern over at least 2 or 3 times. Some of you may decide to get out of bed. Some of you just maybe, throwing your pillow around. Because instead of drifting off to that wonderful dream space, your brain is doing something completely opposite. What's happening is it is racing. It started racing through every possible scenario for the next day, most likely replaying past mistakes, conjuring up worries about things that haven't even happened yet. And the more you try to force sleep, the more sleep misses you. The scenario is all too common, and it is a perfect description of the stress paradox in action, in sleep, basically. Because when sleep becomes a performance metric that you feel you must adhere to, the pressure to perform is triggering a stress response. Your body then will start secreting stress hormones, like cortisol, for example, which is going to increase alertness. That's what it's meant to do. It's your fight or flight, and it's going to keep you awake. Exactly the opposite of what you want to do when you lay down to go to bed. So the irony is that the intention to get a good night's sleep, to do something good for yourself, turns into a source of stress. And this is exasperated. It's made worse if you have a really rigid sleep routine. So you may be following something that the experts told you to do. So let's say that you've read that an expert told you to avoid screen time. That would include, TV, phone, etc. Maybe it told you to drink a cup of herbal tea before bed, and maybe meditating before bed will help you sleep better. So you've created a really strict regimen around these activities, and most likely you have a time too. But then there is one night, things aren't going according to your plan. Maybe your favorite show ran late, or you just weren't in the mood for meditation, or maybe you had to work late at work. There's a lot of things that could disrupt this. And that deviation from your normal routine is going to possibly, most likely, create anxiety, because it's like a little feedback loop going on. And you're going to be thinking, wow, these things happen, so now there is absolutely no way that I'm going to get a good night's sleep. And that statement alone is going to further delay your ability to sleep. So this cycle can be especially frustrating because it feels like, you know what? I'm doing everything right. I'm listening to the experts. I've wrote everything down. I go to bed when I'm supposed to. I don't have the TV on, etc. because you just want a good night's sleep. Yet all of those strategies meant to help you can actually sometimes add to the pressure and anxiety, even if nothing came up, right? Making sleep more difficult. It's like you're trying to quiet a noisy room by shouting over the chaos that's going on in your body and in your mind and your thoughts. And it's just adding to all of that noise. The primary issue begins with the psychological component because you have pressure to sleep, especially when you know that you need to be well rested for the next day. And also, if you haven't been sleeping well, it's probably been adding up, right? So, this pressure can actually increase stress. It's going to make sleep more difficult. The harder you try to sleep and the more you worry about it, the less sleep that you're actually going to get. And this stress response is counterproductive, right? And can be really heightened if you've now further put this rigid sleep routine that you must follow. And it's just going to add to the anxiety if not perfectly followed. And then that leads us full circle back to sleep hygiene. You know how you hear, you might have heard this, maybe some of you, this is new, but it's really common for experts and people to recommend sleep hygiene. It's like go to bed at the same time, no phones, and maybe meditate a bit before, you hit the pillow. And it sounds pretty straightforward, right? And it sounds, in theory, that it'll work. It is to an extent because there is a little more to it than that. Sleep hygiene is a set of recommended practices and habits intended to promote better sleep quality for you and also better daytime alertness. So you're going to feel alert during the day and that you're not just surviving off a coffee and a prayer. Now, common recommendations include maintaining a consistent sleep schedule. They'll say even on the weekend, you should be going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time. You should either read, meditate, make your room really quiet and cool, avoid stimulants before bed like caffeine and, electronics for example. Meanwhile, if sleep debt has been adding up, you're probably full of caffeine just trying to stay awake during the day. But here's the thing. It's not always that simple. Like imagine you're really trying to stick to this routine like we talked about because you want to sleep and you've heard that this is supposed to help, and then your life happens, you have to stay up late for work, you have to maybe, study for an exam, maybe you got distracted with some show that you're watching and suddenly you're stressing out because you're not following the rules. On top of that, for many people, especially those who are having problems sleeping or those that are suffering from sleep disorders like insomnia, these guidelines, they feel more like a strict regimen that must be flawlessly followed. And so that's further pressure rather than alleviating it. And the principles of sleep hygiene, while based on evidence, scientific evidence, they often do not account for individual vulnerability and the complexities of human behavior. So, just as stress about needing to sleep can keep someone awake, anxiety about not perfectly following this recommended sleep hygiene practice can also interfere with sleep for some. Let's take the blue light from screen thing as an example. Everyone says, that's a no no before bed since it messes with your sleep hormone melatonin. This is based on the idea that the blue light emitted from screens is stopping, it's inhibiting the production of melatonin. Now, that's the hormone that signals your body that it's time to sleep. While scientifically sound, this advice does not consider your personal circumstances, like a student who needs to stay up late on a computer or a parent who winds down by watching, Netflix on the computer, I don't know, on the phone maybe. Or you're the boss and you need to finish up emails or put out what your employees need to do for the next day, or it's your job to scroll through social media and you need to do that in that specific hour of the day. For these reasons, the stress of avoiding screens at all costs before bed is now counteracting any benefits gained from reducing your light exposure before bed. So maybe instead of just cutting out screens completely, your life circumstances is saying, you know what? Maybe I just need to pick up some blue light filters, or maybe I just keep the evening scrolling as light as possible, nothing too stimulating. And let's talk about the sleep hygiene recommendation to go to bed at the same time every single night, including your days off. This idea is one that's very difficult for people to stick to, especially on their days off, because it's a strict sleep schedule. And it can be beneficial in some ways because it does reinforce the body's natural circadian rhythm, but life is inherently unpredictable. So maybe you don't work the same time every single day. And maybe one day 2 or 3 days, we'll say, out of the week requires you to stay up late. Family emergencies can disrupt your routine, or just simply the desire to stay out later, maybe on one of your weekends or during the day off, and you just want to stay out later with friends or whatever. So, the fact that you would have to say, you know what, nope, I have to go, I have to be in bed at a certain time, that's impractical. Plus, it's not just about what you do right before bed, it's also about managing stress through the day and making sure your environment's set up for sleep. And that doesn't just include when you go to bed and lay your head on the pillow. It includes managing stress throughout the day. What if you live in a noisy neighborhood, or you can't get your room completely dark, or the right temperature for that matter? Again, you can see this, hyping up your stress response. As soon as you lay down and there's all kinds of noise outside, boom, stress response. If you're too hot, stress response. If you're too cold, stress response. You get the idea. And so here we go again. So let's just make this easy for you. We've come to that point in the episode where I'm going to talk about some things that you can do that may actually work for you so that you can get some much needed rest. You see, sleep hygiene, for what it is, that concept popularized by expert, involves those set of practices that we talked about already. These practices are scientifically sound and are meant to align with your body's natural rhythms. However, they are failing and they're falling short for those who are already struggling with sleep. They are very difficult to implement inside this thing called life. For example, let's say that you tell someone who has insomnia to simply follow a sleep schedule, similar to telling someone who is overweight to just exercise more. It just completely overlooks the complexities of individuality, someone's sleep issues, and the difficulty of changing habits influenced by factors beyond their control. Those factors could be environmental disruptions, anxiety, for example. In order to truly, really address sleep issues, it is, I can't tell you how important it is to explore deeper into the physiology of sleep and your own individuality. And this will involve understanding the roles of various parts of the brain, which regulate how awake you are and how awake you are not. Sleep isn't just a behavior to be turned on or off. Sleep is an actual state. If you don't take anything else from this episode, I'd like you to at least take that. Sleep is an actual state that your body must be ready to enter. can't just turn it on or off. And so this readiness isn't just about what you do right before bed, but how you manage your stress and emotions and some other things throughout the day. Let's discuss some things you can do that will actually help that sleep that has been missing you for so long. And how about we start here? Instead of only focusing on what struggling people who can't get enough sleep, what they're doing wrong, we can actually learn from people who are getting enough sleep and what they are doing right. Because often people who don't suffer from sleep problems have routines that inadvertently are supporting their good sleep. And let me tell you what those things are. Those individuals usually have effective stress management throughout the day. So they're handling stress in ways that they're not letting it build up in their system until bedtime. So that when they're laying down, the only thing they can think about is all the stressful stuff that happened during the day. And they're able to balance their daily routines. So their daytime activities include a mix of being productive and also knowing how to relax, and it helps them feel accomplished and ready to rest. And most likely, they are probably exercising as well. You don't have to go to the gym. I think I've said this in previous videos. You just need to move your body in some way. They also have adaptive strategies. And I think this kind of goes hand in hand with effective stress management, balance in their daily routines. They adapt their environments to reduce any type of chaotic disturbances. And so they're going to be able to create a better sleep setting. Remember, it's a state. So they're getting their body ready. Most likely, they're not surrounding themselves with a lot of negativity if they can help it. So here's the bottom line: instead of trying to fit your life into a strict set of sleep rules, why not tweak those rules to fit your life? And to combat issues with traditional sleep hygiene advice, how about you consider some of these practical steps when you are tweaking those rules to fit your life that will help you address any underlying causes of sleep, why you're not getting any sleep. Now, as you are getting yourself ready for the day by managing day stress, you should also be managing evening stress. So instead of those nighttime rigid rituals, just focus on reducing stress in the evening to the best of your ability. And this might mean just you setting aside, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 10 minutes, however much you can give. Maybe you just sit and close your eyes. Maybe you put on one of my frequency playlists. I'll link those in the descriptions. That's part of the reason why they're there for you. Or maybe you decide to journal. Basically, what you want to do is not take that stress and have it spill over when you lay down for bed. Um, Also, flexibility. Flexibility in your routine. Allow flexibility in your sleep routine. If you're not sleepy at your normal time, if you will, when you go to bed, don't go to bed. Do something else, something quiet, something relaxing until you feel ready to go to bed. Don't associate your bed with struggles because you begin to have this learned habit. And that's a whole nother episode, too. But get up, find something else to do until you are sleepy. Also, ensure that your daytime activities, I told you to ensure that they are balanced. So you want to make sure you're getting that rest, but you're also wanting to make sure that you're moving your body to be able to have that balance so that you do feel kind of tired and really ready, because your mind can be tired and still fully awake, and so can your body. So you want to be able to emotionally decompress. So give yourself, so maybe that 5, 10, 1 minute, however long that you can take to sit by yourself, maybe you give yourself time during that time to also decompress emotionally. So you use it, twofold, which it could include, meditation, maybe, or maybe simple reflection, or maybe just closing your eyes. and that's it, and thinking of nothing. So, this is not a one size fits all approach. It's all about finding what works for you personally. So, maybe you want to try out a couple of the tips that, or even the tips that I've given you, or even the sleep hygiene tips, and see if they help. But also give yourself some grace if you can't stick to all of them. And I wouldn't suggest trying to take them all on at one time, because after all, and remember this, it's about making your nights better, not perfect. And the key to this is to listen to your body, respond to its needs, rather than trying to, stick your routine into some strict set of rules when your life doesn't quite match those rules. And just like any routine, the goal is to support you and not become some source of stress. So you want to make sure, however you're tweaking your nighttime bedtime routine, it's supporting you in your life. So maybe start with just adjusting one of those things and see how that feels. But whatever you decide to do, please just decide to do something. It's important that you get the much needed rest for optimal health. I'm telling you, it's more than just you not getting enough sleep. As you know, we talked about increased cortisol levels that are consistent throughout your body at all times when you're not sleeping well. You're just activating that stress response. So please decide to try something and tell me what you do. What do you do to get your body ready for sleep? Let me know in the comments. Let us know, because it just might help someone who desperately needs it. Until we meet again, take care of your mind, body, and soul.